Yeah. In East Ham's box. They don't. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. It's a meeting of the Wiscasset Budget Committee, and we'll start with the pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so you have an agenda that is set out in paper copies that are circulated around. The goal of the meeting is to review the Johnson Controls Energy Project, and the agenda that I will set out and I'll try to follow to keep things, get things done in a reasonable time here. Is first, I'll give a quick recap of at least my understanding of the project so people are on the same page, and anybody that watches this later can understand what it is we're talking about. It may be useful to have that down the road. Then what I'd like to do to make sure everybody gets a chance to speak based on the information that you collected or feedback that you had after the meetings that took place. I'd like to go around and maybe start with you, Bob, and each person have an opportunity just to say, look, here's my view of where this thing stands, here's what I understand, and here's my position. And so we'll finish with me, and then the Climate Action Committee has been working in parallel. Marty is also on that committee, and I think we've got some people here from the Climate Action Committee. Cassandra Rose, who's the chair of the committee, asked me to play a video that she prepared today, and I also sent out to everybody some of the notes from their meeting. So after we go around the horn, I will pull up, I brought my computer with the video loaded on it so I can play what she wants me to play. I haven't actually looked at it yet, so we will all see that together. And lastly, open discussion, and if it makes sense to do so, vote on a recommendation to the select board and Dennis as to how we think about this project and whether we think we should go forward or not, or we don't have to vote tonight if we're not in a position to do that. So that's the agenda. Any questions? All right, so let me do this quickly. I did prepare a summary of what I'm going to go through. If you want, you can be the teacher's helper, pass out the paper tonight, but might be a few extra copies. So what I did was I just prepared notes based on my best understanding, and it may not be perfect, of what we're here to do, what we're tasked with doing, and the information that we've collected so far. So the objective of the meeting is the Budget Committee was asked by the Select Board and Dennis Simmons to review and advise on a potential opportunity to work with Johnson Controls, Inc. to overhaul the town's aging energy infrastructure. The background is we have increasing and unpredictable oil and electric and to some extent propane costs that have been going up pretty significantly. We have aging systems in basically all of our buildings. We have in some areas poor insulation that needs to be dealt with, poor ceiling that might need to be dealt with. There have been a couple of different efforts to get local providers to deliver energy audits, and I think some of that is still going on. I think Dennis and others tried for a couple of years to get viable proposals for heat pumps for this building in particular, and the pricing was challenging, and getting vendors to respond was challenging as well. We've had separate projects over a number of years that we've certainly seen come through the Budget Committee to look at things like replacing windows in some of the buildings. Some of that has been approved, some of it is probably still to be done. Dennis, I believe we approved last year $300,000 for an HVAC project. So there's been a number of these kind of standalone piecemeal things that we've done as we've gone. And I believe this HVAC project, some of that money is going to get spent this year because it is in the budget. But if we did go forward with
with a replacement project, a lot of that money would come back. I don't really know how much, but a substantial portion of that would go back to the capital fund. Am I correct?
Well, remember, this was part of the bond that we did a year ago, so it would actually essentially pay off the bond probably 2 years.
Right, so I guess the point is, there's a bunch of projects that are been kind of tackled one at a time, some successful, some not, and we have spent money on a pretty consistent basis.
What building was that
Aspects of
for?
this. What's that?
What building was
I
that?
believe that was for this building, yeah. Okay, and then the schools have done something around their own audit of a solar project. I don't know much about that, but they're pursuing things in parallel that, you know, frankly, I don't have much visibility on. But there's a lot of pieces that have been in motion. Now, Johnson Controls has come forward as a potential vendor to help us get through this in a comprehensive way. You know, I think we've all met with Johnson Controls at least once. They've met with the select board. The select board voted to proceed at least through a proposal stage. They are a US-based company. They're a 140-year-old company. They merged with Tyco, which is another large outsourcing company a number of years ago. They do about $25 million $25 million in annual revenue, and they have a $36 billion market cap as of this morning. They're a very successful company based in the United States. Businesses include dealing with building efficiency, building efficient buildings, HVAC, renewable energy, facilities management, and some other things related to that as they focus down on some of the things that they historically did. What are they proposing? They're proposing a comprehensive transition and management deal that would address substantially all of our buildings and replace the energy infrastructure in some cases and upgrade in others, with a strong focus on using renewable energies wherever possible. It would be a 20-year term, at least as proposed. The parts of it that they would do would include an audit, design and engineering of the whole system, sourcing of the stuff that we would install, project management, installation. They'd be involved for long-term management, and they would assist with financing and getting grant money. They've offered to provide a financial guarantee of at least $120,000 a year in savings over what we're currently spending. So our costs would not go up, they would go down, and from day one, basically. The scope is covering all of the buildings that are listed there on your sheet, and for the people that don't have it in front of them: town office, community center, public works, transfer station, wastewater, airport, and possibly the high school and the elementary school. We might include those or might not, but there's optionality to do those or not do them. The technologies they bring to bear, pretty much anything you could think of that is possible to be used, they have expertise in. The things they talked about specifically to us and in the references they gave, like the city of Lewiston and some of the smaller municipalities that they've worked with in the Northeast, include insulation, weatherization, sealing of buildings, updating the burner control systems and the burners, solar. They are very heavy on solar as a solution to a lot of the electrical requirements. Heat pumps, wood pellet boilers, all kinds of miscellaneous stuff. So he gave examples of some things that we probably wouldn't consider using, but they have a lot of resources that they can bring to bear. And the city of Lewiston was one of those where they listed off a whole bunch of different things that they use throughout different parts of their buildings. What's the status? Well, there's a number of different stages that we have to go through if we work with Johnson Controls in particular. First stage, and it's all listed on the materials that we've all seen, was an initial audit and facilities visits, which was completed. And that's where they collected some of the information on our current billing and usage and the stuff that we have now. A preliminary proposal, which they completed. The rest of the stages we have not started yet. The next stage that we would go into is a development agreement, where they would essentially build and engineer the whole technical platform that we would use, and also build out the economic plan and a final proposal. At that point, we negotiate what we want to do, and it sounds like they'd be very collaborative all the way through in terms of we'd be part of all those stages in terms of how it gets designed. And then we negotiate a final deal. If they go through this development agreement process and they do all that building, and we ultimately decide not to proceed, or the voters say no, we would owe them $75,000. So there's basically a walkaway fee to cover their costs if we decide not to play for whatever reason. At least that's what they proposed, whether that's the final solution, but that's what they put on the table. If not, if we did proceed, those costs would go away or get rolled into the final deal. And then we sign an implementation agreement, we start, they build, and all this technology rolls out over whatever that plan is. So that is a very brief, quick summary of my best understanding of the Johnson Controls deal. Anything I missed that's
I think that sums it up
substantially
pretty well. I would just reiterate one thing is that Tom did say is that, we've attempted to do this in a piecemeal fashion, and it just doesn't work out well. And that's what kind of brought this all to the forefront. It's like, okay, we've got a lot of work that needs to be done. How can we get this done in the most efficient manner possible? And that's what brought Johnson Controls into this, because they're just, as you said, the local contractors just can't handle this kind of stuff, so.
All right, so next on the agenda, if we can just go around the horn, and I just add one thing. Can we start with Bob?
Well, it's not, it's a point to add to this overview of how it's gonna be financed. That basically it's a lease, and we only pay, let's say, $120,000 a year. It's not $2 million bond or anything. It's through a lease purchase agreement. Correct?
Yeah, I think that's what they proposed. There's probably a lot of flexibility there in
So
terms
we
of
have to go to,
how we would finance
we
it.
have to go to the town every year for $120,000, not a $2 million project, which I thought originally was the plan, and I didn't think the town would go for that, so.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I've got some stuff that I'll hand out a little bit later, but I think you're on the right track. Essentially, what they proposed is, they haven't done the build yet, so we don't know what the design is or all the technology that'll be used. But the Johnson Controls people have said they expect that the total cost of the deal would be between $2 and $2.5 million. Included in that is all the hardware and gear that we need, plus their management costs. And it's a little bit fuzzy because we haven't seen a final proposal, but it sounds like there's some regulations from the state of Maine in terms of when you do a deal like this, how the contractor needs to stay around. And so their management costs over the life of the deal are included in that 2.5 million and get paid out to them from an escrow account as you go. That $2.5 million we don't pay up front, it gets financed somehow. They proposed a lease, so the lease amount would be less than what we're currently paying in total energy costs, starting on day one. So basically, you get a fixed amount that includes everything, annual payment. As you said, we would not go to the voters and ask for $2.5 million. We'd go annually like we do with any other debt thing or any other lease and get an appropriation for the amount, which might be $250K, it might be $300K, based on what the final deal looks like. So net, we're paying X amount now, we'll be paying less than that going forward, and they've given us a financial guarantee that that lease amount is gonna be at least $120K less. Now that guarantee is not done, because we don't have a deal, but I think, does that answer what you're describing, Marty?
Right.
Okay, cool. Bob?
Yeah, I guess a question that came up as I walked away. So we paid $120,000 for 20 years, 2.4 mil, which is the project cost. Okay, so all of the savings have been spent in terms of the delivery of improvements. And so, again, in 20 years, that's sort of the wash. We paid for the improvements. What really is the residuals that the town ends up with? There's certainly some solar arrays, but at the same time, he said 17 years, solar arrays start going fuzzy or whatever. So my question that I don't have a great answer to is, all right, we funded the thing, we paid the paycheck for the work, and we got through 20 years, but we paid for it. what's the residual? In other words, what was the benefit to the town other than reducing bills, which we had to pay, at the end of 20 years? You know, what's that look like? We got a new boiler here, we got some of these things here, but many were 20 years old at that point. So are we then at 20 years out, gonna sit down with Johnson Controls again and go, okay, time we do this again? And so we just paid our dues over those 20 years, and I'm wondering, you know, in the real hard sense of it, what is left?
When I get my turn, I'll have some comments on that.
But that's really my only,
That's excellent question.
Yeah,
Robert.
same question, basically. Somewhere along the line, I wrote down, no capital expenditure by the town. So we're gonna go out and borrow money? And put that 2.5 and put it into escrow. Correct?
Well, the capital amount, if you paid it and didn't pick up any debt,
Right,
didn't finance it, didn't do it on a lease,
okay,
$2.5 million.
right,
So we'd have the option of going to the capital fund, pulling out 2.5 million and paying it. You could do that.
right,
Or you could finance it and get a lease for all of that. And that lease amount is gonna be less than what we're currently paying now. So when you say capital outlay, no capital outlay, if we do it on a year-to-year lease, right?
right.
I think there's a lot of flexibility in it, and I'm jumping the gun here, but you know, when you get down to the end of it and find out what the real proposal, you have some flexibility in terms of how you want to pay for this. But I think what they're trying to do is say, you can do all this stuff without paying more than you're paying now. That's what they're trying to say. Anyway, so that's what I would respond.
Town attorney look at these documents,
Not at this point, we haven't, no.
it'll happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to spend the money on the attorney if there's just absolutely no interest in doing that, so.
Gotcha.
Okay, Brian?
First of all, I have trouble with just going to one vendor without getting an extra, product from somebody else. Secondly, how much can we take on? I mean, with this building, which one's most critical as an energy hub? This building or the community center? Now, I'd like to see one building at a time, that's just me personally. Technology great, but you need a good, solid energy source. That's why I prefer propane. Convert this building to propane or the community center propane, then add your solar panels or your heat pumps. Now, heat pumps, their efficiency goes way down in the winter, and your electric bill go way up. And we can't control electric bills anymore. We're financing wind farms and everything else that there's no payback to. So I would start with, again, a company that's gonna offer new furnaces, preferably gas or propane, pick your pick. Gas line didn't come this way, I don't believe. So, but also the long-term marriage, this company. We also have written in here that we have to get our service from them, and they come by on a regular basis. A lot of times that's chargeable over and above the cost of the equipment. So that we add cost continuously. So the $120,000 that we're supposed to gain is gonna have to long get eaten down. So I've got a problem with the whole thing. It's such a long-term commitment. Unless somebody can prove that, they're gonna totally save us money besides just, lowering our costs over 20 years, and then we have to rebuild it all over again. The technology changes. So, let's see what else. Yeah.
Good, thanks. Marty?
I agree with Dennis that, each project would probably cost too much money and he probably wouldn't get that approved. And, in order to get these things done, this is a good way to do it. What I see though is that we could not necessarily do their entire plan. He pointed out that we set the priorities. So some of the things may not be that cost effective. So if we have, now, I didn't see that in the agreement, that there's a way to assure us of, being able to pick and choose which projects we want. For example, I know this building isn't insulated well enough, and the oil is just going up above the windows and doors and roof. So obviously that's one big project, but, it would probably cost, I have no idea really, but maybe let's say $300,000 or something to insulate it, tighten it up, et cetera. I don't know if that would be feasible to pass in a warrant article. So I think we have to be able to find out that, they're true to what they're saying, that we could pick projects. And I'd like to see it paid off at the 15-year rate rather than the 20. In other words, instead of having a 2 to 4.5, let's have a $1.5 million project paid over 15 years. And here again, that would give us a better return sooner and answer some of the questions as far as payback and obsolescence of technology, et cetera. And I mean, he was pointing out that there's efficiency of solar cells that are going up and going up, but it's been relatively stable over the last few years. So, but with all the grants available now, this is the time to move on this. Let's see what else. Oh, well, I'll bring it up later.
We'll come back.
Jump back in.
Okay, thank you, Marty. John, I think you have to sit in, but I know you can do.
I always talk with the strength in numbers, and if we're talking just two buildings, these are probably the two buildings that don't cost as much as the other two buildings in the school system. So I would think that we might try to put something together with the school system in order to get the most bang for our buck. If they're gonna come in and do this, we're all paying the oil bill, whether it's a school or whether it's here. I think there should be a group effort to do that. I also agree that we shouldn't put all our eggs in one basket here. This shouldn't be a quick decision. We should bring at least one other company in here, perhaps two, of similar magnitude that can run a cost comparison between the two and the different incentives that they might offer for that. If we stay with these guys, we get one bite of the apple, and a 20-year term seems like an awful long term to me. I would like to see a shorter term for payback, not 15 years, 10 years, so that we could justify taking the savings that they claim they're going to give us and turning that over to the improvement of the infrastructures, which we'd be doing anyways. And if we did it individually, like Dennis said, it's hodgepodge, and we lose when we bid out things hodgepodge, for sure. Because each one of those projects is gonna have inflated costs of it as a result of going individually instead of part of a major project. So I'd like a shorter term. I'd like to see some good competitive bidding with it, and then sit down, put it all in a column and see what are we really looking at.
Very good. Okay, so I'm gonna hand out one thing, because surprise, those of you who know me know I did a spreadsheet, because I do a spreadsheet when I get up in the morning to figure out what I'm gonna have for breakfast. So I will hand that out. There's a couple of extra copies.
Ham, eggs, toast.
Oh, yeah, that's it. It just helps me to sort of, like, figure out some of these questions about what are we really getting and what's the real savings and all that. And there's not a lot of data yet to really break it down, but I'll go through that in a couple of minutes. So I guess my point of view is this: I strongly support doing something with JCI or another firm that can do what JCI is doing. I think it's the right kind of approach to work with them or somebody that operates at the same level. I think we should move as fast and as comprehensively as we can. When we go through the numbers that at least I would point out, I think there's some reasons why that will at least become worth talking about. As I thought about this deal, people have different priorities, climate and other things. I came up with like 5 things that I thought were my priorities and concerns. One is execution risk. Can you actually execute this thing? Can you get it done? Deal structure. What kind of a deal makes the most sense? So we talked about some of that. Time, and there's multiple dimensions of time to think about. And what's the right technology is number 4, and then 5th is economics. And usually I put the economics first, but that's last. And the execution risk, as Dennis said, one thing that I learned doing a solar project when I was at Hewlett Packard, and when I put solar panels on my last house, is there's a lot of people out there that have absolutely no idea what they're doing. So lining up with a company, whether it's this company or another one, like the one you mentioned, Brian, that has a track record and can execute and is gonna not go out of business tomorrow is extremely important. I think that's true for heat pumps too. There's a lot of clowns out there installing heat pumps. I have one installed in my house by one of those people. He doesn't answer the phone anymore, so.
You got that one too?
I got the guy, yeah. So now I'm putting two more in, and I'm probably gonna do solar next year, and the priority isn't the technology, the priority is the company. That's extremely important in my mind. So, an execution risk, if I rate JCI on a 1 to 10 scale, I put them as a 10. I have no questions about that they'll be one of the companies that will be able to execute. If we find somebody else, you have to think about them in that context, in my opinion. I don't think there's any benefit personally to breaking it into phases or doing pilots. There's been some discussion of that. There's nothing we're doing here that's completely exotic. It hasn't been done before. And when you look at the numbers of what we're spending now, the longer we go, the more we spend. That's the bottom line on it. The second thing was the deal structure. I agree. I like the comprehensive deal approach for a number of reasons. Number one, it's the amount of time we have to spend on it. I like the idea of rolling all the costs into one number and one payment that we pay every year. And we have certainty about what we know what that's gonna be, not 5 different vendors and this one this year, that one next year. So I like that. The negatives are there's this walk away fee that we have to figure out how to deal with. And we have to go to the voters to get approval for $75,000 in the event that we might have to pay that. What I would do is probably go to Johnson Controls to see if we can negotiate around that. And I have a couple of ideas that I'm not going to put on YouTube in case the guy watches YouTube. But I think that might be partially negotiable. Piecemealing it, I don't think that's good for the taxpayers. The longer we take to do this, the more we keep spending on the old stuff. It's all bad. And my tax bill just went up $800 for the year. That's a lot of money. So I'd like to see that go down, personally. So I relate the deal model, whether it's with them or with somebody else, it's like 8 out of 10, because there are a lot of unknowns, and I think we have that walkaway fee, which is a concern. The third one was time. There's multiple dimensions of it. Dennis's time, management time. How much time we have to spend on this? We don't have a deep bench. Great people, not a deep bench to go manage all these projects. Time to results. The faster we get this stuff up and running and replaced, the faster we stop spending money. If we don't take action fairly quickly, we're looking at 2026 as when you start doing an implementation, because we've got a budget window coming up. And, if we bring in some other vendors, which I think is a very wise thing to do, and again, Brian has identified what looks like a very good one, we ought to move fast through that. And I don't know that personally it's been suggested we should do an RFI and an RFP and the whole thing. I wouldn't waste any time on that unless we're legally required to. And I don't think we are, because you might end up working with vendors that you don't want to work with. And JCI might not even bid. So I think that there's value in moving quickly with due diligence. The fourth thing was the technology. I don't know anything about this stuff except for the few projects that I've observed or been involved in. It seems to me that they're heavy on solar. Solar is probably the most practical technology because you're going to lock in your costs. I don't think we should spend more money on oil. I really don't. And it's not primarily for climate concerns. It's because the unpredictability of cost. I put solar panels on my house. My electric bill went away. Stuff sat up there on the roof and generated electricity. No moving parts. Nothing ever broke. The only problem was I moved. So now I am here. And my propane guy loves me. So I'd like to, we're probably gonna do that again at this house next year. And we did it at Hewlett Packard, we put them, when I worked there in headquarters, put them all over the roof of the headquarters building. Problem went away, so I think it's very practical technology. It's proven, these panels now, the utility scale ones, that's not 20 years, it's 33 to 35 years. When these utilities put them in that we see around Maine. So, I think the technology is probably the same as you get from any other company, but that's my thoughts on it. I think JCI has the ability to bring all that stuff to bear. And then the economics. So this is a little bit cumbersome, but I'm gonna just take a minute if you'll indulge me and look at this spreadsheet. What I tried to do was a couple of things. What I tried to do was to project over the next 20 years, what our costs might be, okay? I also tried to go look at, this 120, if you save $120,000 a year, what's that worth? Or are there other ways to look at what we're likely to save? And this is what I came up with. There are some, in the blue, there's things you can plug into this spreadsheet to change the numbers. I plugged in, what I did is I went back and looked at the last 3 years of our budget pages, Dennis. I pulled for all of the facilities, oil, electrical, and in the 2 places we use propane, the propane costs, right? And the oil expense over the last 3 years has increased 51% per year. Heating oil. Our electrical expenses increased 51% per year. And propane costs has increased, I'm sorry, the electrical went up 10% per year, and the propane, which is actually a very small number, increased 51.7%. So our costs have gone up, and they're unpredictable. So over those last couple of years, 1 year the oil went up 33%, and 1 year it went up 55%. So that's the pain we're feeling right now. Is that fair to say? Right. So then what I did is I actually plugged in growth rates of 5% for each of those, because if I plugged in 50% per year, which I don't think that's realistic, and the numbers get terrifying, right? Okay. So I just gave you the first page of the spreadsheet that rolls out to 2044, just 20 years out, and summed it up. So if you look down here under where it says expenses, 20 to 25 to 2044, if you just add up what we're spending, assuming a 5% growth rate per year, the total is we're gonna spend $14.475 million on energy costs over that period of time. If anybody thinks it's gonna go down, I disagree. So it could be higher than 5% a year based on past experience, right? The numbers are bad. Numbers are bad. And so then I looked at 2 ways to say, okay, what do we save? First thing I did is I said, all right, let's just take that $120,000 a year we're guaranteed that they'll promise us. What's that? Well, under savings guarantee line, that adds up over 20 years to $2.4 million, which makes sense. And then what I did is do that in present value terms. You discounted it at 7%, which is what the government uses for doing discounting cash flow analysis. Present value of that is 1.272. So you're basically, if you were spending the capital, writing a check for $2.5 million, you're getting in present value terms a guarantee of 1.2 back. So you basically get a 50% return on it, just looking at the 120K. That's for starters. Now, if you really look at it and you say, all right, my real costs are these increasing numbers growing at 5% or more per year, that's what the next section was designed to do. It said, okay, let's look at a real savings scenario, like way down the bottom of the page here. And I don't know if this is 100% real, because it's using what data existed, right? I figured out what a 5-year lease, a 20-year lease is on $2.5 million at a fairly high rate. And you could do that at a lower rate for 15 years. You end up in about the same place in the grand scheme of things, but that's certainly an option. The lease payment on that would be $198,000 a year. So you're saving a lot more. Now, this is why I think these guys put forward a savings guarantee, because they know there's more to be had. And it's a function of what the real growth rates are likely to be, right? So in my mind, solar gets us out of having to buy from an electrical utility. And that's unpredictable. Rolling all that stuff into one annual payment gives us certainty. And not having certainty has been the biggest problem over the last couple of years. So the way I look at it is there's huge savings to be had here. You know, if we ultimately piecemeal it or roll it out in phases, you end up spending more money. I did a calculation just coming over here just before I got in the car and said, okay, what if the oil and electric grew at 10% a year? Where are we in 2026? It's $90,000 more than what we're spending now. So there's no benefit to waiting. And so I know I'm going long, but I thought it was worthwhile to try to wrap some numbers around it. You know, net, you know, I would go forward. I would recommend to go forward. I'd recommend to get one or two other vendors in here ASAP. I try to hit this budget season if we could, and if we can't, then let's do it next year, you know? So that's where I came out on it.
Another thing for solar is, we know, we don't have any control over it, but we know there's gonna be EVs on the road. We know people are buying more and more heat pumps, so the demand for electricity is going to increase the need to increase the grid. You're talking about billions of dollars, not just if it's CMP or consumer-owned, whatever. You're talking about billions of dollars in investment, so there's no way electricity is gonna go down. So, you know, it's always the only option at this point. We don't have enough wind here to.
I can generate a lot of wind, it's not true in the last 10 minutes, but, sure. Okay, so that's kind of the round table. I think we'll do another kind of full round of discussion now that everybody's thrown their concerns and ideas on the table. First, there was an update from the Climate Action Committee. Cassandra Rose, again, she gave me a video I can play. It looks like it's about 6 minutes long. I think if I don't do it, I'll get in trouble with her.
Well, you don't wanna do that.
I don't. While I do that, is there any of the climate action people that are here want to provide any other update on your meetings?
I'm gonna see wrong with the video.
I think Cassie has it probably in this, maybe.
Yeah, but Tom, while you're getting that set up, I had a few questions or comments, may I?
Please
Just
do.
about the discussion or to the budget committee, may I?
Please do.
Okay, hey guys, Leslie Roberts, resident in Wisconsin. So, I appreciate the need for speed and wanting to take advantage of whatever rebates, whatever programs, state and the feds have that could have offset the cost of this investment. I'm just wondering, looking at the scope here, the Johnson Control scope, I'm curious because they are talking about perhaps high school and elementary school, but I think we just spent almost $1.5 million for the scenes assessment at the school. I've heard it was successful. I'm curious, I mean, that might be a redundancy for us to have them work on the schools as well, since they've just had these upgrades, or at least get feedback from the school about how well the scenes upgrades went. Are they happy? Is it saving them money? I think the three largest consumers in town are the school, the community center, and the wastewater treatment plant, right? Those are the three most expensive things to keep the lights on. So, I mean, I know you don't want to piecemeal it and you want to go large.
That's only my opinion.
Right.
That's not.
But I
anything other
think
than
if we wanted to focus on the three largest consumers or the two largest consumers, certainly the community center. I don't know what we're doing with wastewater treatment plant. Do we need to audit that if we might be moving it in a few years, or spend millions of dollars to upgrade it? We're going to move it. I'm just wondering if we want to consider the scope of the overall project and focus on the largest consumers first.
Dennis, do you have any comments on the status of the schools and if they've
So,
shown anything?
I know the Siemens project, or I'm pretty certain Siemens project is paying dividends. It's saving them more than what they had projected that it was going to save them. I don't know what the scope of that was. I mean, this is a comprehensive insulation, heating, and I think that was more along the lines of lighting and much more limited in scope than what we're proposing here. The previous superintendent was kind of lukewarm on this. New superintendent wants to move ahead with this. She wants to be a part of this. They're particularly interested in the solar aspects, because, you know, there's no AC in any of those schools, and those kids suffered early in the summer, and so they're interested in the solar part of this. So they very much want, at least the superintendent anyways, very much wants to be a part of this. And so I think another reason not to piecemeal it. I mean, part of my concern with piecemealing things is we're putting things off, which is only going to get more expensive every year that it goes. The boilers in this building are 30 years old. And so of some of that 300,000 that we appropriated, we've spent some on necessary upgrades that would have to happen regardless of whether we do this or we don't do this. The glycol in the system had turned acidic, and it literally is eating the system because it has been left unattended for so long. That's why all of the zone valves had gone. It's eaten up a circulator pump. It's just, you know, it's past time. And, you know, granted, probably proper maintenance hasn't been done on this in a long time. But the longer we wait to do that, the more the more expensive it's just going to get down the road. So, you know, I'm just here to listen. I'm not here to try to persuade or offer advice, but
Is it Johnson's Control who found that out, about the glycol?
they did that for us.
But they found that out, or how did you find out about it?
Well, that was part of their overall assessment when they came in here to do their initial assessment. But the zone valves, so many of the zone valves in here have been shut off because they failed. When they fail, the heat just runs nonstop, which means you then have to shut them off. So there's actually 2 zones just in this room. This one was shut off all winter, while this one was trying to run to keep up with the entire room. And same with some of these other rooms. You know, the zone valves were shut off. We didn't have any heat in those zones, so we're relying on the other zones to try to circulate the heat into those rooms. So we can't do another winter like this. We just can't. We can't. We won't. I didn't. I spent the money. I got it done. But like I said, it would have to have been done either way. Because if you do decide to go with heat pumps, you're going to need a backup system, and it's already sitting here. So we just upgraded it. So even that alone will save us quite a bit of money in oil just on this building, this winter, what we've done so far.
All right, let me play Cassie's video if I have this correctly.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Sandra Rose, the chairperson of Wiscasset's Climate Action Team, WCAT. I'm a proud Wiscasset resident, a climate scientist by training, and the former Maine Climate Council coordinator in the governor's office. In my day job, I work on climate and clean energy policy and helping states to take action on climate change. I'm sorry to not be able to join you in person today alongside my colleagues from the committee, but wanted to share a high-level report from WCAT's discussion of the Johnson Control Energy Efficiency Upgrades proposal that we held on Monday. We are Wiscasset's newest ad hoc committee and were convened earlier this year by the town to help advise on climate change, as well as enroll in the Maine Community Resilience Partnership, which is a state program that helps communities reduce emissions and prepare for the effects of climate change through direct support and grants of up to $50,000. The primary objective of WCAT is to help our community plan for the many impacts of climate change, like increasingly extreme weather, heat waves, rising sea levels, public health issues, and much more. WCAT will also help advise the town to undertake projects aimed at adapting to these changes and reducing our contribution to climate change. In our discussion on Monday, our members agreed wholeheartedly and strongly recommend that the town should lead by example by planning to make energy efficiency, renewable energy, and municipal fleet improvements now. These improvements would not only save the taxpayers money by lowering the energy used in buildings like the town office, the community center, and our schools, but they would also help contribute to helping Wiscasset adapt to extreme temperatures like the many devastating heat waves that have hit our country this summer and last, as well as contribute to Maine's climate goals. There are extremely abundant state and federal funding opportunities right now that would help defray the overall costs of making these improvements. For example, federal tax incentives, rebates, and technical assistance from Efficiency Maine, the Governor's Energy Office, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, electric school bus funding, etc. The state of Maine is prioritizing help and funding to towns around Maine to make improvements exactly like those proposed by Johnson Control, with millions of dollars in funding expected to flow to our state very soon from recently passed federal legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law. So WCAP members agreed on Monday that on several recommendations for the Johnson Controller JCI proposal and any energy efficiency and renewable energy projects that the town considers. The first one is to prioritize electrification of heating and cooling. This will result in lower greenhouse gas emissions, as well as electrifying to provide cooling in general. For example, installing pellet boilers will not provide cooling to buildings, which is a critical need with our warming climate. Installing heat pumps or heat cooling pumps that provide energy efficient heating and cooling would allow the town to respond to climate emergencies like increasingly frequent extreme temperatures, both hot and cold, providing substantial co-benefits for the cost of installation, such as avoided heat illness and death in our community. We feel that this really adds a lot to the benefit side of the cost benefit analysis of a project like that proposed by Johnson Control. This would help alleviate school cancellations due to heat in the fall or the spring, and it would also assist with cold and winter with more efficient heat pumps that use less energy to provide more heating than other existing heating technologies. Another example that we discussed is that the town could use improvements to the community center through installing heat pumps and better weatherizing the building to establish the community center as a community warming or cooling center during extreme temperature emergencies, which again is a critical need with our warming climate. The second recommendation is to generally prioritize climate considerations in project planning. For example, resilience to the impacts of climate change, like more frequent extreme storms, preserving existing forest land when considering solar installation siting, etc. We also recommend making municipal and school buildings electric vehicle charging ready, which will help support both community member and municipal EV adoption, which is a major goal of the State Climate Action Plan, and another source of long-term potential savings to the town. We lastly wanted to recommend considering including a municipal fleet audit alongside the town energy audit to transition to more efficient electric vehicles, which have lower lifetime investment capital costs and lower greenhouse gas emissions on top of it. There was an additional proposal that our committee looked at by John Snell LLC that considered or proposed including a municipal fleet audit alongside the energy audit. So WCAP members concluded in our discussion that there may be benefits to the town to entertain a competitive bid process for an energy audit, solar upgrades, and planning. We also felt that the town could request plans that propose upgrades that happen in phases if that improves the financial feasibility of projects. For example, improvements to the community center first, followed by other phases. The National Association of Energy Service Companies Directory of Preferred Partners, which is recommended by the U.S. Department of Energy, as well as other Maine towns who are undertaking similar projects, could provide a list of potential contractors to us to invite to competitive bid. And in an aside, Johnson Control is listed in the directory that I just mentioned. WCAP members still had several questions about the Johnson Control proposal by the end of our discussion, which I'll let my colleagues share in person. Thank you again very much for allowing me to share the results of our discussion today. WCAT and I are happy to help the town connect to any state resources that might be of interest that have already been mentioned. I will also share a written version of these remarks along with links to some resources that I think will help the committee and town develop any energy efficiency upgrade projects. For example, efficiency means free consultations for the municipalities program. Please feel free to reach out to me and WCAT at any time, and I really look forward to hearing how today's discussion goes.
Okay, so I think we've gotten through the lion's share of the agenda pretty efficiently in under an hour. And just based on the sharing that's taken place, I think we all picked up some things. Maybe we can just engage in an open discussion and start to lean towards what kind of a recommendation we want to make. So the floor is open.
On the fact that, I think we still need a second vendor. I'm not against technology. Solar panels on these buildings here, is there storage capacity on those, or do you just burn up what comes in?
So my understanding of it is that Pam actually asked that question, and I asked at the meeting we had with the fellow from Johnson Controls. She asked a question about, okay, is there battery technology in it? He says, I don't envision there being battery technology in it. I'm not an engineer. My understanding, he said it would be connected to the grid. And that's the way most of these things are, so that if you need backup power for whatever reason, that you would still have access to the electrical grid. And I know when I had solar on my home previous to this, it was connected to the power grid, and we actually generated more power than we needed, and we got a check for doing that. I don't know if that's how it operates in Maine, but we would not have to have storage, and I think that's good, because, you know, these solar panels have a long lifespan. Build them with enough capacity to be able to handle any slow degradation that happens. Batteries are a different kettle of fish altogether. The battery technology is going through a ton of change. It can be volatile, it can be expensive to replace. So that seemed to me like the right answer.
Yeah, I saw a news report, it was a number of years ago, a farmer up north who went totally off the grid.
Yep.
With solar panels, and he had a shed out back, almost as big as his house, for battery storage.
Sure.
And I don't know how he's doing right now, but, so.
Yeah, when I bought mine, it was bought through Solar City, which is now part of Tesla, which is why I went with them. And they had the battery option, but it was very, very expensive and it scared the heck out of me. So it was gonna end up being unnecessary.
I still look at still the basics, insulation. You gotta solve all those problems and then start figuring out your energy also. I got a 200-year-old house over here, and the first thing we did when we moved in, had it insulated, and, for the, energy efficiency of Maine that came in.
Sure. What you were just talking about.
Yeah, so they did a very good job.
Yep.
So that did definitely help.
They're good out there.
And I hate beating the drum, but then we swapped over to all propane, so oil and everything else, so I saved from both a lot of money.
Mhm.
So, again, I'd like to see a second bid.
Now, you've identified a company.
Yeah,
Yeah,
mechanical services.
Yeah, you have at least some experience with them from the past.
Yeah, they've dealt with, major chains, hospitals, they're the main base company. So I've run into the people before, and we had to go and set up the kitchen equipment, and we had to work with those folks. And also recommend what stuff would work better with the power sources they're gonna be bringing us, so.
It looked on the website like a worthy, player.
I looked at one part of it, said, the heating portion and electrical portion, they actually mentioned a windmill.
They did.
So I said, oh. No, I think it'd be one worthwhile to get a bid from, tell you the truth.
I don't disagree. Questions, comments?
Oh, so did the school contact Siemens since they had before?
I don't believe so, not something on this business. I mean, there were contract Siemens, I know Ted reached out to mechanical services, just to do this building, and they had no interest.
Really?
And I don't think it's a matter of, they just didn't want to do it. Right now, nobody's taking on any work because they just have more than what they can handle, so.
With another try, maybe.
And I'm not saying that we shouldn't, contact other vendors. I'm not saying that at all. Whatever the recommendation comes back, and the select board decide they wanna do, that's what I'll end up doing.
So going with a company like JCI, we're not being specific at this point, so I don't know how you can bid other than the,
The walkaway fee is about the only thing that I see you can bid on right at the moment. And you gotta remember, if you go forward with this and we walk away from it, we're still not walking away with nothing.
Right.
We have an engineered plan that we can still work from.
Correct.
So we are getting some benefit from that, irregardless of, you know, what decisions get made.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, because, yeah, I think Leslie, not to put you on the spot, you mentioned the audit. The audit is a very small part of what they're gonna do. They've already done a substantial portion of the audit.
Which didn't cost us anything.
Didn't cost us anything. The engineering plan
Yes,
with, and, you know, they described doing workshops with people from the town, you know, basically going through and talking about what the requirements are, talking about phases, talking about any of that stuff that we thought was important to talk through. You're coming out at the end of that with, you know, an engineered plan and a better understanding of, you know, that might be worth $75,000. Now, you know, I think there may be some potential to write something into that development agreement that gives us a little bit more freedom about how we pay that. You know, I think we should talk more about that.
and we can, and maybe, and you said you had some ideas, so
I always have
I won't try to force it out of you now, but, I'm sitting here thinking about that since you said it myself, and so I got some myself.
Yeah, I think it's all a negotiation, you know, at the end of the day, it's a negotiation. You know, they put a starting point in front of us, we don't have to sign it, we can work from there. That's at least the way I would think about it. Any other questions, comments,
Did you
feedback?
send out the proposal from John Snell to everybody?
I did, I sent it to all the people on the budget committee.
So the reason I'm favoring that, it's not that much money, and I don't know.
Yeah, I'm afraid it is that much money. I don't have it to spend, so.
3,800? You don't have that to spend in your extra 50,000?
Not at this point in the budget season, I wouldn't.
Well, I killed that idea then, didn't I? Because the reason I like that was, one, he would do an audit for the vehicles, and as Dennis likes to say, we don't want to kick things down the road. But if you have a plan on how to replace them in a reasonable manner, because eventually they aren't gonna be gas-powered vehicles. So if we had a plan for that kind of money, which I think is reasonable, and also he would give us a better idea of what projects would have a higher salary, return on investment or whatever. So I figured if something like that could be done, we could have a better idea which projects we might want them to proceed with. But if you don't have $3,800, unless somebody wants to contribute.
What else do you think?
It does seem to address the future buildup, as you mentioned. If we don't do anything at all, we're gonna be spending a lot of money on individual projects. If we see a savings of $120,000, and we see that coming back in the form of capital buildup down the road, that's work that's controlled and coordinated that we might perhaps not do if we did it hodgepodge like that. So I do favor putting it all under one plan, and somebody that knows what they're doing to take care of it.
Yeah. You know, I think, I would just do Don and I are old salesmen. I would do the trial close here and say, you know, I think it'd be interesting to have a motion that recommended to the select board that we proceed aggressively to build an arrangement with Johnson Controls and also bring in one or two additional companies to provide alternate proposals. And I think we need to think about putting that $75,000 potential expense on the next available ballot.
So there will be, because the primaries in Maine this year are by ballot, and not caucus, in March. So there will be another opportunity for an easy town meeting, in March to do something by ballot. If you feel we need to do it sooner, we'd have to do an open town meeting, and those don't get well attended, people don't like them.
People should.
So the most logical date would be March.
So a scenario where you said, look, between now and March, which is really, beginning of February, you got 3-4 months.
Well, actually, but we really don't, because if you're gonna do it, if we do it in March, we gotta remember, if we have to finalize this 60 days before the election.
So you got a couple of months in which we could track down and see if somebody else could pop in a proposal, at least at this level, which is not super detailed, so maybe that's possible to do.
I'm quite sure we probably can manage that.
I'll move on your motion.
I don't remember what I said.
You can replay it. It was too long. I couldn't
Especially as it's too long. Do you want to try again, or do you want me to try to restate it?
Then we proceed with the JCI project with $75,000 agreement. And we'll also look at, try to find a couple other companies that would also go along with it, put up a proposal. And if anything else.
The HSAP was part of it, I think.
Aggressively, I think. is what I said.
Aggressive, I believe.
So it's on the ballot in March, how's that?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes with unanimous approval.
Email me what you want and I'll get it done.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, fine people.
Want the motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.